Hey folks, my name is Bruce, and this is my series called Film Illustrated. So I was a few years late to the party, and I finally saw Sam Mendes' 1917. Within minutes, I immediately regret having missed it in theaters. There are probably only a handful of movies every decade that absolutely demand to be seen on the big screen. Movies that are such visual feasts where if you saw it anywhere else, it's a completely different experience. Ironically, having not experienced it in theaters, I think 1917 is exactly that. And of course, the hidden star of the film is the camera. At this point, the Warner has become a signal of import for most movies. It's something that will always garner a certain level of attention, regardless of how successful the overall film is. Needless to say, there are lots of very impressive Warners out there. However, they don't always mesh well with the rest of the film. And regardless of how good the take is, when they stand out, there's always a sense of tension that just misses the characters and falls onto the film crew instead. My mind is ultimately pulled towards the logistics of the shot, taking me out of the experience. On the other hand, there's also the case where the filmmakers did something so impressive that you can't help but think of the logistics. Victoria, for example, is a movie actually shot in a single take without any edits. While I was watching it, I couldn't help but think, what if the cameraman had tripped during the last act of the film? Or what if the crew had to go to the bathroom? Ultimately, and I'm gonna get some flack for this, I had a really hard time being immersed in that film as well, simply because what they were doing was such an impressive feat. In comparison, I was glad to find that once 1917 started, I was almost always immersed on the journey with Blake and Schofield. Ironically, I think a big part of this is because it isn't actually filmed in one take. It consists of many shots edited together to look like one. The cuts are hidden throughout the film, like here, here, and here. In a way, the stakes are lower, relatively speaking. That tension which falls on the film crew is alleviated because they're able to do multiple takes. If there is a mistake, they can reset and go again. Even though it isn't truly one take, it is still undoubtedly an incredible feat. The skills of the actors and filmmakers are clearly on display, but the filmmaking never comes off as over the top or ostentatious. In 1917, the camera moves effortlessly throughout the film, rarely ever calling attention to itself. The shots are always steady and never shaky. It perfectly observes the action without feeling contrived. More often than not, action scenes in a war movie are usually shot with a handheld look. Take the Warner in Saving Private Ryan for example. First, the Tiger tank fires its cannon, and we follow Corporal Upham across the street, up the stairs. The handheld feel is fitting because the sequence is so frenetic and so much happens within this one shot. The shot will switch between perspectives and interior and exterior multiple times throughout. When we get to the second floor, we switch perspectives to the machine gunners as they defend their position against the Germans. We then switch to Upham and follow him to the window, ending the shot on an exterior again. The camera was immensely successful at capturing the chaos and frenetic nature of war. However, I think the reason why 1917 was so immersive is because the camera is so subtle and precise. This fits especially well when the majority of the film is a tense, slow trudge through the silent battlefield, not knowing whether or not there's an enemy around the corner. If they had opted for a more handheld look, the camera might beg the question, this isn't a documentary, but who's holding the camera? In a conventional film with cuts, the filmmaker can utilize the handheld look when they need to, cutting in and out before the style becomes too noticeable or out of sync with the emotions or the pacing of the film. The Warner in Saving Private Ryan is nearly imperceptible because the scene is so tense and hectic. There are a million things happening at once, and finally, when it's time to cut, the frenetic rhythm of the editing matches the chaos that was happening before, blending the Warner and the rest of the film seamlessly together. With the single-take aesthetic of 1917, instead of mixing shooting styles and potentially having incongruent transitions, the camera is always consistent, passively observing, making what's on screen feel like it's your perspective and not someone else's. The other aspect of the camera remaining invisible is that it rarely ever moved or looked anywhere without being motivated by the characters. The times that it does is used to convey a sense of unease, confusion, or wonder. This, of course, is a principle that almost every film follows, but in The Warner, it's often omitted in order to achieve the shot. Sometimes the camera will move on its own to show information the characters don't know, or often the camera has to move on its own due to the limitation of the set, or the actors and crew simply don't have room to maneuver around each other. Take these two clips in Atomic Blonde for example. As Charlize Theron's character throws the bag across the staircase, the camera follows it, but there's nothing motivating it to turn back, so it has to do it on its own. And here as well after she kicks one of the goons down the stairs. Later in the shot, the camera frames the two characters on either side of the wall. Then it quickly moves by itself to the larger room in order to better frame the action. As the fight progresses, it ultimately ends up in the smaller room again. Clearly, Atomic Blonde and 1917 have very different goals, and this is a 10-minute wonder, and like 1917, even though it's made of multiple shots, it is still incredibly impressive. While these camera moves are ludicrous nitpicks, it's little things like this that ultimately betray the presence of the camera operator. In 1917, for every camera move to be motivated by something, it truly boggles the mind how much planning was required to achieve it in a one-shot film. It's something that requires so much skill and effort so that the effects can be imperceivable and unobtrusive. Their blocking was impeccable, tying all the conventional camera shots like wide, medium, close-ups, or over the shoulder, all together naturally. And this is what you get. Here the camera becomes a follow cam, and we see what they see as they need to be more cautious approaching the front lines. This also allows us to see Schofield's interaction with the environment and the other soldiers. The camera then pivots on a close-up of a soldier Schofield was talking to, almost turning into an over-the-shoulder shot, allowing us to see Blake approaching and asking him some questions. As Blake moves forward, he pushes the camera back, pivoting around him. We then follow Blake and Schofield towards the men sitting down. The camera's momentum overtakes them as it focuses in on a tight medium shot. When Schofield starts moving, it motivates the camera to pan up into a close-up, so we can see him intently searching for Lieutenant Leslie. As they find him, they move into position, leading the camera to turn, and we see Lieutenant Leslie framed by Blake and Schofield in a medium shot. All these things coming together is why you hardly ever feel the camera, why everything feels so organic, and you forget you're still watching one continuous shot. Aside from the logistics of blocking and camera moves, there's also the logistics of time and space. The characters of the film are always pressing forward, never revisiting any previous locations. Because of the one-shot aesthetic, for the scenes where they're on foot, it meant they couldn't fake the distance they're traveling. Everything had to be planned, paced out, and shot in story order. A behind-the-scenes featurette reveals they have built over a mile of trenches for the film. It also showed a glimpse of the lighting model and setup for an absolutely stunning nighttime sequence. As a film that primarily takes place outdoors, they're also at the whims of the weather when it comes to matching lighting conditions for each take. Obviously, the amount of planning that goes into every movie is immense, but for 1917, it especially shows. Every movement of the actors and camera is precise yet natural. The physicality of the real-world locations and lighting all help ground you into the setting of 1917. The one-shot aesthetic truly makes you feel like you're on a journey with these men every step of the way. The steadiness of the camera unflinchingly observes not only the casualties and destruction, but crucially also the waste of war. By the end of the journey, I felt as exhausted as the characters were, perhaps not physically, but certainly emotionally. 1917 isn't the first film to have the one-shot look, but it definitely is the first to make me forget about the highly technical aspect of it, all the while still evoking all the emotions they wanted with this technique. It's the precision of the camera and the effortlessness that makes this movie such a singular experience, and I'm legit bummed out for not having seen this in theaters. So what did you guys think of 1917 compared to some of the other one-shot movies? I definitely thought a lot about Birdman, but ultimately left out the comparisons because that film is less about the physical journey through harrowing situations and more about the internal unraveling of its characters. However, I feel the comparisons about the camera certainly still apply. If you've enjoyed the video or like the art, please like and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Be good to one another, and I'll see you next time.